Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues. My name is Juliane Campfield. I'm the director here at Deutsches Haus at NYU, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to our 5th Volkmar and Margret Zander Prize ceremony tonight. It's a very strange feeling that it's already the 5th year. I still remember the first year very well, and I also vividly remember last year when Klaus Legevi received the award and the now unfortunately late Benjamin Barber gave his laudation, and it was shortly before the elections, and people were talking about the elections in a way that, yeah, it doesn't look so good, but everything will be fine after November 9th or November 8th. And it's strange to think that now, a year later, we find ourselves in a very different political landscape that has nothing to do with tonight's event, or maybe it has everything to do with tonight's event. We'll see. In any case, we are very delighted that Karsten Voigt, the distinguished former coordinator of German North American cooperation at the Foreign Office of Germany, is the awardee tonight, and we're equally delighted that David Gill, the new Consul General in New York, will hold his laudation. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the continued support you show for our events here at Deutsches Haus, be they cultural or academic or political or all of the above. I'll say a few words about Karsten Voigt's biography, and then we'll proceed. Karsten Voigt served as the coordinator of German North American cooperation at the Foreign Office of Germany from 1999 until 2010. Voigt had previously served as a member of the German Parliament from 1976 until 1998. Member of the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO from 1977 until 1998, and as a chairman of Jusos, the Young Socialists in the Social Democratic Party from 1969 until 1972. He is a member of the board of Aspen-Germany and also a member of the board of the German Council on Foreign Policy. Voigt studied history, German and Scandinavian languages and literature at the Universities of Hamburg, Copenhagen, and Frankfurt from 1960 until 1969. Voigt's publications include Religion und Politik, Ein Vergleich zwischen der Situation in Deutschland und den USA, in Religion and Politics in the United States and Germany. Now, a few words about the Volkmar and Margret Zander Prize. I know many of you are very familiar with it, but I do want to share some thoughts on it because some of you might not yet be that familiar with it. The prize was established by Professor Margret Zander in memory of her late husband, Professor Volkmar Zander, former head of the German department of NYU and founder and first director of Deutsches Haus at NYU. The prestigious annual prize, which was awarded for the first time in 2013 to Professor Fritz Stern, who, as you know, sadly also passed away last year, then to Gary Smith from the American Academy in Berlin in 2014, in 2015 to Leah Friedrich Pfeiffer, the president of the Max Kade Foundation, and, as I mentioned previously, last year to Klaus Legevi. The prize honors individuals who have made outstanding contributions to the cultural, political, and academic relationship between the German-speaking world and the United States. So you can see why Karsten Voigt was a logical choice as another awardee in this prestigious line of awardees. Deutsches Haus at NYU is, of course, very grateful to Margret Zander for initiating this award, because it gives us a possibility to honor such worthy and distinguished individuals such as Karsten Voigt, who have made tremendous contribution to the transatlantic relationship, and that, of course, is very important to all of us and very dear to our heart, and perhaps now even more important than it has been in the more recent past. So we are delighted and very grateful, of course, to Margret for creating this award. Please let me also thank the friends of Volkmar and Margret who have been very strong champions of the prize and also strong champions of Deutsches Haus at NYU. Many of them are here tonight. I recognize many of the faces. And we thank you so much for the support over the years. They also made it possible for us to get this wonderful Steinway upright piano, which will be in use a little later at the end of the event when we round things out with a fabulous music performance. That said, it is now my great pleasure to welcome Joan Reuterschan from the Friends of Volkmar and Margret to the podium to say a few words and to give a brief Grußwort from Margret, please.
Thanks so much. It's an honor for me to be here and to extend the greetings of Margret Sander to you, Karsten Voigt. I will commence with that because that is by far the most important of my messages this evening. Lieber Karsten Voigt, ich schicke Ihnen Grüße aus dem Odenwald und freue mich, dass Sie zur Erinnerung an Volkmar Sander den Volkmar and Margret Preis im Deutschen Haus erhalten und annehmen. Da das Private auch politisch ist, hoffe ich sehr, dass Sie meinen Protest gegen manche Verhältnisse in den USA und Deutschland teilen. Gute Wünsche, herzlichst Ihre Margret Sander. And I will briefly translate it. It probably isn't necessary, but dear Karsten Voigt, I send you my greetings from the Odenwald, and am pleased that, in memory of Volkmar Sander, you are receiving and accepting the Volkmar and Margret Sander Prize at Deutsches Haus. Since the personal is also the political, I greatly hope that you will share my protest against some conditions in the United States and Germany. So, just briefly, the Friends of Volkmar and Margret Sander are a group of about 80 individuals, some 10 or 15 of whom are here tonight. We're former colleagues, co-workers, and students of Volkmar and Margret. That is, we studied, worked with the Sanders here in Deutsches Haus or in the German department during their years here. Our group formed spontaneously after a memorial service for Volkmar in the House in October of 2011. Many of us are active in the worlds of academia, publishing, and cultural exchange, both in the US and Germany. We stay in touch on the internet and meet once a year to attend this annual prize donated by Professor Margret Sander, which is always so beautifully organized and orchestrated by Deutsches Haus director Juliane Kampfield. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Joanne. You've provided me with a great segue because it's not just me who makes things happen, but also my wonderful colleagues and our unpaid interns and deeply appreciated student workers. And I would like to share your thanks with them and especially also with my beloved colleague Sarah, who is here tonight for all your great work on working on this and many other programs. So thank you. Two more individuals that should be thanked, especially in conjunction with tonight's event, are Fred Ulfers, who's been amazing in providing guidance for this program. Fred Ulfers, for those of you who don't know, is an esteemed colleague from the German department who's taught here for about 500 years and is still up and running and a very dear colleague. And he can't be here tonight, but I thank him from the bottom of my heart. And I also would like to thank Katja Wiesbrock-Donovan from the German consulate, who's been instrumental in making this happen as well. And I want to thank you also for a great collaboration over the last years. So here you are. You deserve it. It is, of course, a great, great privilege that David Gill, the new Consul General here in New York, will hold the laudation for Karsten Voigt, and he will do so momentarily. I just wanted to say a few words also about his biography. And I realized as I was preparing to read the biographical information that it contains a lot of German institutional titles that are really hard to translate into English. and like one institution can run over 2 lines, and I might get really, I might mix them all up, but I'll try. So, and you should have worked at institutions that are easier to pronounce. It's okay. So here we go. Prepare yourself for like a Loriot speech on my part. I'll try better. David Gill grew up in a rectory in Herrnhut in the eastern part of Saxony in the former German Democratic Republic. This is the easiest sentence of this bioinformation. He was denied attendance and completion of a public school and subsequently studies at a public university on the basis of political reasons. After an apprenticeship to become a plumber, he first underwent theological training and eventually attended a theological seminary of the Protestant Church in Berlin-Brandenburg. Now is the time when we should play the Brandenburg song that Brigitta Voigt showed to me earlier. We'll do a whole program about that. I find that very interesting. Google the Brandenburg song. It's really quite something. Sorry about the distraction. I'm just trying to pull myself together so that I don't stumble over more words than I already did. In 1990, he initially was chairman of Normannenstraße Citizens Committee at the headquarters of the Ministry of State Security, also belovingly called Stasi, and then head of administration, Parliamentary Special Committee for the dissolution of the GDR Ministry of State Security, Office of National Security. This is actually 3 lines, not 2 lines, so you see why I suffer so badly. I'm joking, but of course these are important institutions, and they were really important after the GDR collapsed. So I'm joking, but this is good stuff. So he was spokesman and head of division of the Federal Commissioner for the Files of the State Security Service of the former GDR before studying law in Philadelphia. After holding positions with the Federal Ministry of the Interior and with the Office of Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information in Berlin, he was for 8 years the deputy representative of the Council of the Protestant Church in Germany to the Federal Republic of Germany and the European Union. During the term of Joachim Gauck, President of Germany from 2012 until 2017, David Gill was State Secretary and head of the Office of the Federal President. As of August 2017, he's the German Consul General in New York. Yes. All right. I would now like to ask David Gill to come to the podium and hold the laudation for Karsten Voigt. Please give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliane Camfield. Lieber Karsten Voigt, liebe Brigitta, ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly delighted, and it is a great honor for me to present the Laudatio for an outstanding person. For Karsten Voigt, who shaped the German-American relationship in a manner in which only very few others have done. The Deutsches Haus at NYU awards the Volkmar and Margret Sonderpreis to exceptional individuals who, and I quote again, you have heard this quote, but I want to repeat, have promoted and contributed to the cultural, political, or academic relationship between the German-speaking world and the United States. There is no better choice, in my opinion, than to award this prize to Karsten Voigt, who has dedicated almost his entire life to foreign policy and to the friendship between our 2 countries. Relentless, persistent, and always with an optimistic and positive outlook. Karsten Voigt combines many characteristics which make him a great communicator and bridge builder. He is, yes, a politician, but he is also a listener, a teacher, a great speaker, and he likes people. Karsten Voigt has a unique gift to explain cultural sensitivities and political sentiments, historical experiences and social backgrounds of the societies in the United States as well as in Germany. And he uses his gift. He has become an important intermediary and advisor, especially during turbulent times. His extensive political and personal contacts in the United States have allowed a constant exchange of views and cooperation. Life on Capitol Hill is busy, and members of Congress are hard to book. Even requests for meetings with heads of the German Länder can be difficult to arrange. But Irmgard Fellner, a former member of the German embassy staff in Washington and later personal assistant to Karsten, told me that this was not the case for Karsten. He was always welcome and was actually in high demand. He knew almost every senator and congressman. Mentioning Karsten Voigt's name opened doors. But I jump ahead of myself. Karsten Voigt was born in the small town of Elmshorn in the federal state of Schleswig-Holstein in the north of Germany. Due to the early death of his mother at the age of 14, he was sent to a Protestant boarding school, the Raue Haus in Hamburg. There he became an active and leading member of the Protestant youth movement in Hamburg. And he might not remember it, but I remember that he once told me that this time and experience shaped his attitude towards the world and the people, regardless of their social status, wealth, profession, or education. After his graduate studies, you heard it in history, German, and Scandinavian studies, he became a scientific associate and later deputy director of the Volkshochschule in Frankfurt, a kind of community college. In his 20s, in 1962, the early 20s, he joined the Social Democratic Party, the SPD, where he became head of the Young Socialists in 1969, the left-wing youth movement of the party called the Jusos. And you heard it already, for more than 20 years, he was a member of the German Bundestag, the federal parliament. Foreign policy was his mission, expertise, and passion. In 1983, he became the foreign policy spokesperson of the SPD. Karsten was and is known as an independent mind who follows his beliefs and convictions, not ideologies or party tactics. This characteristic has gained him credibility and respect many times over, regardless of party affiliation. Regarded as a leftist, he nevertheless was a strong supporter of the foreign security policy of Chancellor Helmut Schmidt and argued against a unilateral disarmament of the West. As somebody who understood the balances of the Cold War era, he supported the widely unpopular stationing of US Pershing II rockets and cruise missiles in Germany as part of the NATO double-track decision. This set him apart from the majority of his own party, the SPD. Following his political focus, it is logical that Karsten Voigt was also for more than 20 years a member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, where he held various high-level positions, starting from the chairman of the Committee for Security and Defense to vice president, and from 1994 to 96 as the president of the Assembly. And he also argued in favor of a reunified Germany remaining a member of NATO. There could not have been a better choice than to entrust Karsten Voigt in 1999 with the position of the coordinator of transatlantic cooperation in the Federal Foreign Office. He served under a Green minister, Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer, and a Social Democrat, now the President, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, for more than a decade in this position. Given the many crises during this time, including the 9/11 attacks, the war in Afghanistan, the Iraq war, and the global financial crisis, we were really fortunate to have had Karsten, who was always a voice of reason in these times of crisis. When Chancellor Gerhard Schröder decided not to support the Bush administration in the Iraq war, and Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer confronted Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld at the Munich Security Conference with the famous words, "I am not convinced," it was Karsten Voigt who called for rhetorical restraint on both sides. The press characterized him as an ambassador between two different worlds and a transatlantischer Gutwettermacher, literally translated, a transatlantic sunshine maker. Karsten Voigt called for a new Atlanticism, which, as I would see it, essentially focuses on the large areas of common interests and shared values and forms a bond between the two sides of the Atlantic. But Karsten Voigt didn't only meet the powerful, the rich, and the famous. He traveled extensively throughout the United States and visited universities, colleges, school and cultural institutions, state houses, and city halls. While most other German politicians and diplomats focused on the two coasts and on Ivy League contacts, Karsten Voigt always filled the void and took a deeper look. He traveled to places like Oklahoma, Kentucky, Mississippi, Utah, or Oregon, and in doing so, he put Germany on the map between the coasts. As former German ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger acknowledged, Karsten Voigt was ahead of his time. He knew about the many phases of American society, about the complexity and plurality of its structure. With his efficiency and speed reading, he sometimes frustrated his staff members and interview partners. As Irmgard Fellner put it, Karsten is someone who had already read, analyzed, and commented the latest book, while everybody else still tried to borrow it from the library. And we heard this as well, he was and is active in the many transatlantic organizations, not only the two Juliane Kempfield mentioned, but many others. He is a member of the Advisory Council of the Atlantische Initiative, as Senior Associate Fellow and Board Member of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Auswärtige Politik, the Aspen-Institute in Berlin, the Einstein Forum in Potsdam, the Checkpoint Charlie Stiftung, the Fulbright Alumni Club, as well as the European Leadership Network in London. He indeed shaped the transatlantic debate like only a few others in Germany. There would be much more to say about the person, Karsten Voigt, about his role within the Social Democratic Party, for instance, how he influenced the debates over decades, or about his extensive traveling behind the Iron Curtain, where he met the powerful but also the suppressed, and therefore knew how people thought and felt there, or about his engagement for religious education in Berlin, or currently in Eastern Europe. But today, we have another focus. Ladies and gentlemen, granting the Zander Prize to Karsten Voigt is a call to both sides of the Atlantic to keep working on the relationship which at times might be more fragile than we would wish. We should not take it for granted, but strive for continued cooperation in the optimistic and reassuring spirit of Karsten Voigt's outlook and lifelong work and experience. I'm very grateful to Karsten Voigt for setting us on the right path telling us not to waver, but to remember our common values and core principles. Karsten has earned and he has deserved the respect of the people on both sides of the Atlantic. He has put his stamp on the Federal Republic of Germany's path in the international arena. He did so as a true democrat, a realist with a clear focus and a human attitude, and a passionate advocate for a stable transatlantic relationship. Thank you, Karsten. Your work and dedication, your passion and engagement will carry us for many more years. Your words will continue to be heard, your advice always highly valued. Germans as well as Americans honored your contribution to their friendship. Thank you very much.
It is now my great pleasure to award the 5th annual Volkmar and Margret Zander Prize to Karsten Voigt. Please give him a warm award reception. Welcome. And Karsten Voigt will now have a chance to deliver his Academy Award acceptance speech, which we will not cut short by an orchestra, but just by the piano. Just kidding. No, he can speak as long as he wants to, and I'm sure given the current state of transatlantic relationship, we might be here for a while. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the award. Thank you very much for the speech. I hope I could believe it, but I'm not so sure whether this is not a little bit too much. But anyhow, I liked it. What was not mentioned, I have been at the Deutsches Haus before, several times for short visits, but for a longer visit together with my wife and my, at that time, very young boy, for 6 weeks, I think, in 2009. I've been intern here at the, not an intern, a guest, so to say, at the Deutsches Haus. We enjoyed, at that time, New York enormously. And like most Germans, I like to live in this liberal part of the US. And we felt comfortable in America under the presidency of Barack Obama. President Obama in those years reached popularity rates between 80 and 90% of Germany, in Germany, 80 to 90%. President Trump is actually reaching between 10 and 20%. Because of my stay at the Deutsches Haus in 2009, and because of my later interest in the work you are shaping here together with your team, I know how important it is that you have such wonderful people like Margret Zander and Volker Zander who support the work of the Deutsches Haus. Without their support, many works could not be completed or started. Here, you always need private support, but sometimes it also would be better if the public, the state, would support you more, which is a very controversial debate in Germany, and even more so in the US. In the invitation to this evening, you can read, and it was mentioned by David Gill already, that I have been trying to analyze similarities and differences between religion and politics in the US and Germany. And I will deal a little bit on that subject, because I think it explains more than you could read on the surface. I have especially been analyzing the impact of the religious right on American politics. And I have not only met people with a Protestant background in the US. Leo Baeck Institute, you know that I've been interested in German-American Jewish relations and always been interested in that aspect of our intensive relationship. In a certain way, American Jews are more interested in Germany than many people with German background. It is, as a good friend of mine has once described it on dinner, it's a relationship, a negative symbiosis, whereby a negative fact, the two people cannot understand their own history and identity without relating to one another. And my idea was always, this is the non-Protestant aspect of my relationship with the United States, and not only with the United States, to reshape this negative element and use it for something productive in the future. And when you are now seeing how many American Jews, Israeli Jews are visiting Berlin, you can have a sensibility and a sense of hope that even the darkest elements of history can produce some positive and constructive elements for the future. I've also been meeting with American Muslims after 9/11. After the Friday prayers, I was invited to speak in a mosque in Chicago. And this was very interesting for me because in that mosque, everybody spoke English, which is not the case in Germany, that everybody is speaking German. In the majority of mosques in Germany, other languages are spoken, especially Turkish, but not only Turkish. Only a minority speak German. And most of the people in the Muslim community in the United States are middle-class people. Not as in Germany, lower-class people, guest workers. And most of them come from Asia and not from Northern Africa and the Middle East. So when we discuss about Muslims and immigration, we should also look deeper and see that there are many differences. For example, up to lately, a couple of years ago, the majority of Arabs living in the United States were Christians and not Muslims. So, but I will now concentrate a little bit again, because I will speak also about Trump, about religion on the right-wing side. In the American heartlands in Kansas City, South Carolina, and several other states, I discussed with right-wing evangelicals, with promise keepers. I attended prayer breakfast at Congress. There is a prayer breakfast association in the German Bundestag, 200 members. It functions in a very different way. And how religion and politics relates to one another in Germany, there you are a good example. And because you have a Protestant background, you studied theology, you were representative to the German state by the Protestant churches. But I never used your example to explain the differences between Germany and the United States. I used the example of Joachim Gauck, your former boss and my personal friend, our former president. And when I started to engage American evangelicals, I said, we have a president who was an active pastor, top. He's married, top. Has 4 children, top. But he has a girlfriend. Shock. And this girlfriend is his permanent partner and the acting First Lady of Germany. Unthinkable in Germany 20 years ago, unthinkable in the United States today. And in that sense, this example of Gauck and your example are showing that religion and politics play a different role in Germany compared with the United States, and that religion in Germany predominantly is on the center-left wing side and not on the right-wing side. The German Protestant churches have practically no relationship with the evangelicals. And therefore I asked members of the Bundestag, especially Christian Democrats, to get in contact with the evangelicals. I asked the Humboldt University to engage them and to study this phenomenon, because we couldn't study and understand the United States without this factor. And I said that already during the Obama years, because I smelled something was growing in the US. You cannot understand Trump without Pence. And I very often view Fox News, and not only MSNBC. And I listen in these days to the very clever person, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as I was listening to the speeches of her father and to speeches of Jerry Falwell on Sunday morning. And it is this combination of a right-wing traditional policy with some right-wing populism, sometimes even some elements of racism, plus Christian right, which has created a new situation in the United States, of which Trump is the result, but he is not the only person. And many of it might be that next time he would not be re-elected, but the phenomenon on which he is based will not wither away immediately. It's a longer element, like the changes in German political culture took decades and did not come with 45. German political culture has changed in a liberal direction during the last decades. When you look at the last Bundestag, the Bundestag was to the left of the German population, because the right-wing populists got last time only 4-point-something%, therefore they were not represented. And the liberals, who in civil rights issues are very left, but who on economic issues are market radicals, were also not elected into parliament. So 10% were not represented. And you had a coalition between Angela Merkel, who represented a conservative party. In Germany, she would, in all likelihood, not be a member of the Republican Party. And she had a coalition with the more left-leaning Social Democrats. And the only opposition parties were the Greens and the left-wing party, former post-communist party. So you can imagine that this type of policy is different from the type of policy which you see in US Congress in these days. The alternative for Germany will try to change this liberal tendency in German politics. They will have a negative impact on German politics and German political culture. Our debates will become more controversial, which by itself is not negative. But I'm relatively sure, I read the articles of Cohen. I like him very much in the New York Times. He's a wonderful analyst. But I grew up in German politics, and I'm relatively sure that we will have a lot of temptations and conflicts, but that basically the liberal and pro-European consensus in German politics will prevail. The right-wing populism in the US, the National Front in France, the Lega Nord in Italy, and the Alternative for Germany are part of the same anti-liberal spirit and anti-immigration sentiment. It exists on both sides of the Atlantic. And the first guy, Professor Fritz Stern, whom I knew for decades, was always very sensitive when anti-liberal movements started in Germany or in the US in the last years. Right-wing populism is an international movement, but in each country they are the result of specific national conditions and traditions. For example, there are very few right-wing Christians who play a role in the Alternative for Germany. The Alternative for Germany is strongest where the post-religious traditions in Germany are strongest, in certain parts of Saxony and Thuringia and Saxony-Anhalt. This party wants to protect the Christian culture, but has its strongest base in the North-Christian, post-religious parts of Germany. And the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic organizations are altogether enemy of the Alternative for Germany, which is one of the differences between Germany and the US. The transatlantic relationship remains important, but it's subject to change. We need change because the world around us is changing. Since the end of World War II, each generation has collected new experiences and insights regarding the American-German relationship. Overwhelmingly, they have been positive, but there were also elements of crisis and disappointments. At present, the statements and policy of President Trump are by most Germans being perceived as a risk or even a threat to the values on which the transatlantic partnership has been based since World War II. So we have a serious problem. We have a serious problem from both sides. You have this perception on the German side, and on the other side, you have, to put it mildly, a lack of support for the big success story of European integration by President Trump. So he is challenging certain assumptions, and on the German side, certain assumptions are changing. I will never forget the situation in 1989. A few days after the war came down, I was heading from a subway, moving upwards, to the main train station in Frankfurt. And in front of me were a family with 3 children. Judging from their dialect, they came from Thuringia. On the way up, they saw an advertisement for a flight to New York. And the mother saw this ad, and she turned to her children and said, "And next time we are going to New York." I was deeply moved, since this sentence expressed the longing of an entire people that had dreamt for a long time to escape East Germany and to enjoy the freedom of no travel restrictions. Now the hopes had been fulfilled. Their first stop was West Germany, yet they wanted to see the world, and New York was a symbol as well as a travel destination for this wide world. Many generations of Germans felt like this family. For the finance industry, New York was the center of the world. German tourists were intoxicated by the rush of this big city. They crossed the US on Route 66 to experience the ways to San Francisco. And it was the highest honor for German students to study at an American elite university. For many German politicians, the reception at the White House was just as important as the audience with the Pope for many Catholics. That has changed. Germans who strongly criticized the American government were nevertheless willing to learn from American role models in the US society, education and music. The energy and power of self-initiative stemming from the roots of the US society were and remain inspirational. Both sides remain inspirational for the other. Both sides learn from each other. And both sides will criticize each other and differ from each other. Because since the foundation of the US, there's always been criticism towards Europe and vice versa. Whatever President Trump is saying and doing, the societies on both sides of the Atlantic will remain connected through shared interests and values, as you said it, David. The United States is Germany's most important partner outside the European Union. While the US is not a member of the EU, it nevertheless will continue to be a European power. The political cultures of Germany and the US have changed in the last years. The debates in the US have become more polarized. Germany has developed, the debate were polarized in the 60s and 50s, and very ideological. Germany has now developed a high degree of consensus on many society and foreign policy issues, excluding the extreme right and the extreme left. As a result of the last federal election, we will see more controversial debate, as I already said. But the consensus on basic democratic and liberal principles in a broad center is stable. The alternative for Germany is excluded from this consensus. And the left is, at least in parts, excluded from the consensus, not the whole party. In respect to migration, both societies have moved closer. Contrary to the US, we are not an immigrant nation, but an immigrant country. We are not talking about new Germans in Germany. We are redefining what it means to be a German. We are redefining German identity. This is controversial, must be controversial. Germany will change as a society. It will change our idea of what it means to be a German. And many people fear these changes. This is discussed in a very heated way in the US and in Germany. We have a debate about this immigration issue on both sides of the Atlantic. I think sometimes the debate is shriller in the US than in Germany these days. I'm not quite sure, but I smell it. If I compare the statements of the presidential candidate and now President Trump with those of German politicians, I will not find anything comparable among Christian Democrats. Some Bavarian might have a tendency in that direction. When it comes to Trump, I'm less reminded of the Christian Democrats than I'm reminded of the alternative for Germany. The experience of immigration connects Germany with the United States now. But we have different immigration problems and different immigration patterns. Very often is overlooked that the largest number of immigrants which we have are not coming from Arabian countries. The largest number of immigrants which are now coming to Germany come from other EU member states. And what might surprise many people, the largest surplus in terms of immigration is not coming from Turkey. We have more people with Russian-German background living in Germany than people with Turkish background. And the people with Turkish background are stagnant. The highest numbers in the last year were coming from Poland. In the last 2 or 3 years, the net influx was not, the highest number was not coming from Poland, but from Romania. So the immigration patterns are changing as well. I will end by saying, in the last decades, the US may have lost some of its appeal, yet as a society is still more appealing than any of the new authoritarian governments, Erdogan, Putin, because the US is a society which created a state. Russia is a state which is still looking for a society. And this is a major difference which one never should forget when one discusses about authoritarian tendency in the respective countries. During the 50s, American culture was a role model for the majority of West Germans. Today, many Germans feel very alienated when they read about the US, especially about the political discussion in Congress. This polarization is displayed in the media. And I think one of the major concerns for anybody in the US should be your media situation. In Germany, more than 50% of all the TVs are public radio, public TV stations. And normally, the information which is used by the population is by more than 50, 60% being used by public TV and not by private TV. This news element, not only Facebook, how media are used, is one of the deepest concerns which I have about the future of democracy. This is a big challenge for us, but it's even a bigger challenge for the United States. The US and Europe do influence each other. They learn from one another in good and in bad times. This is also will be true in the future. We will make mistakes. We will argue with one another. We are not always good examples for one another. Yet, I'm certain, just as in the last century, close transatlantic relations are necessary for both sides and will have an impact on both sides. Our relationship is needed as an element of stability in a global situation which is more and more unstable. We cannot guarantee that we can provide stability which is necessary for the world if we work together. We can guarantee that if we don't work together, it will be a line in direction of disaster. So our cooperation is a necessary but not sufficient precondition for global stability. Transatlantic relations will always be complicated. It's an asymmetrical relationship. The United States is more important for Germany than we are for the United States. In an asymmetric relationship, the bigger partner will always ask himself, where is this small guy relevant? And the smaller guy, in this case Germany, will always say, where can we have an impact on the bigger partner? But in spite of these asymmetries and the different historical backgrounds, we need one another. And we need one another even if we in Germany have the alternative for Germany, and if you have Trump. They are an important risk factor for our relationship, but they don't diminish the necessity of our relationship. And therefore, everybody should be aware of the conflicts and the difficulties, be analytically realistic, but intentionally optimistic. Thank you very much for the role.
Okay, now you see why this guy deserved the award, right? Thank you so much for this very insightful Bestandsaufnahme, or how to translate that, like analysis of the states we find ourselves in on both sides of the Atlantic these days. There's reason for pessimism, there's reason for optimism, who knows how it will turn out, but as we just heard from Karsten Voigt, we need to work together even in challenging times, and the fact that we are here talking about it is a sign of that. I think everybody who's in this room and everybody who will watch this at some point in the distant future is interested in engaging and continuing and furthering transatlantic dialogue, and so there is still some hope for world peace. As some person once said, there's hope, but not for us, but I think there's hope for us. So there you go. He said that, thank you for coming tonight, for celebrating with us the 5th annual Volkmar and Margret Sonderpreis awardee. Thank you, Karsten Voigt. Thank you, David Gill. Thank you, Joan Reuterschan. Thank you, everybody whom I haven't thanked, and I'm thinking of Gwyneth Paltrow during her notorious Oscar speech, which now we all look at in a different light, giving recent revelations, but I shall not go there. So we'll hopefully see each other again on October 20th in 2018, and perhaps even before. And in the meantime, all of us, let's work on the transatlantic relationship. Serious relationship work. But first, let's fortify ourselves over a glass of wine, cava, water, and have some quiche and Linzer Torte. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the evening. Thank you, everybody.